We turn now to tech journalist and podcast host Kara Swisher, who is the author of Burn Book. She joins us now from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Kara, good to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Margaret.
So we just heard from two of the congressmen really pushing this legislation right now. But notably, a key Republican senator, Josh Hawley, who supports the bill, said the Senate will nickel and dime it, death by 1,000 cuts. Nothing that big tech doesn't want moves across the Senate floor. Do you think he's right? Why would this be different than any time in the past?
Well, I think, there's a lot of lobbying going on about this bill, and the Senate is slower, and there's some issues in the bill that probably they're going to want to correct. And so, slow rolling, it's the best way to have this thing not pass. It is unprecedented that it moves so quickly in the House, although it's been a long time coming. You remember Donald Trump's the one that had the executive order around TikTok and this service. And so this has been brewing for a long time. It's just that it will take a lot longer in the Senate to do it, and there's opponents like Rand Paul and others, and Chuck Schumer hasn't been particularly supportive or non-supportive of it. So it'll just take longer, and that's in the favor of TikTok.
And I know you've said in the past on this program, you use TikTok, but only on a burner phone. In other words, you don't trust that you could carry it on a phone with you into private spaces and not be spied on?
Look, Margaret, I don't trust any of them, but I particularly don't trust a Chinese-owned company. That's all. I had it on a burner phone. I wrote a column in the New York Times about 4 or 5 years ago about it. I think it's an exciting app. I think it's a broadcast network. It's obviously entertainment, and it does it really well. I just feel like every Chinese company I've covered has had the tentacles of the Chinese Communist Party involved in it, whether they like it or not. In the case of some of them, they don't like it, but that's the case. Now, that's not to be said there's not issues with every single U.S.-based company, Meta and Alphabet. But this is a very different step level as far as I'm concerned. And this is a foreign adversary, and it's very different. China, a Chinese-owned company would not be able to own CBS. And I consider this is a media company. And so that's the question. Are we going to allow a media company from China to have so much purview around the United States? We are not allowed to be in China. Our companies are not allowed to be there, and so there's not reciprocity because they would be worried about the exact same things we should be worried about, which is propaganda, surveillance, anything else. And I get the First Amendment arguments and everything else, but TikTok's not going away, kids. This is the thing that's that TikTok's using a little bit that is, I think, disingenuous in that it's not going away. Someone's either going to buy it or they're going to be allowed to continue to operate with some guardrails, which is happening now with Project Texas, which I won't go into details, but there's got to be some way to monitor this particular service more than the others. At the same time, we should have privacy bills, antitrust bills, algorithmic transparency bills, which Congress has not acted on in 2 decades of internet hegemony, essentially.
Exactly. There aren't really guardrails, period. TikTok is valued at approximately $100 billion, according to Wedbush Securities, but just $40 billion without the source code. Who would buy this?
Oh, a lot of companies. You can see Microsoft picking it up, maybe Apple. There's a whole bunch of consortiums. Steve Mnuchin has one, Bobby Kotick, who just sold Activision to Microsoft. There's a lot of people who would buy this. No, I think the question is, and I had a really interesting discussion with Mark Cuban about this recently, what do you buy precisely? Because the algorithm's not coming with this company. The Chinese government would never let that happen because the algorithm will actually, if you could reverse engineer it, prove possibly that there is problems with it or anything else. I don't know if there is. I just know should there be allowed to have the opportunity. And so what are you buying? You're buying the 170 million, say, U.S. users and a great brand, but the algorithm isn't there. And one of the magic of TikTok is the algorithm and the history that you have there.
The thing that targets you. This past week, Elon Musk, who you cover in depth, posted that this bill is all about censorship and government control, and it's far too broad. There have been concerns about foreign investors in X and Twitter. What do you make of this argument from him?
Well, this is the guy who just fired someone for doing an interview. I don't know. I don't believe anything about what he says. You could make that argument, but why is it? If it's owned by a U.S. entity, you'll be able to do whatever you want. And again, Twitter is chock full of foreign investors and everything else. So I don't know. I don't really take that into account much. He just likes to say free speech a lot and then does the exact opposite. So I don't know what to say.
You're referring to an interview that Don Lemon did with Elon Musk and the controversy.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm not being specific. Yeah, no, it's constant like that. Like talks about free speech and then freezes out journalists and stuff like that. Anyone that goes on and on about free speech, really, you have to really look more carefully about what they actually do rather than what they say. But in any case, that's the argument from that side. That is that argument. So,
but I raise him particularly because Mark Warner, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has said there's not a single person more beholden to the Chinese Communist Party than Elon Musk because of his other businesses, and yet he owns this.
I would agree. I would agree. I don't know. You have to, consider the source. That's how I would put it. I always consider the source, Margaret, and in this case, really consider the source.
And you know this business and this industry so well, Kara Swisher. Thank you for your insight.